So we'll have a bit of a break now and talk about the changes that have happened today with the pubs opening, the hairdressers opening. Now I'm very pleased about that one, um, and then campsites and hotels as well. What are your opinions on this?
Well, I've heard many times that today has been dubbed Super Saturday because everything is opening,
Yeah,
or the majority of things are reopening now. Now, anyone who knows either Harry or me knows that we do like a good drink the majority of the time, and I think if you will find me at home, you will find me with a beer in my hand watching the TV. But I won't be travelling to the pubs. I won't be travelling to the pubs or the barbers at all.
no.
I will get my dad to cut my hair when I feel appropriate. I'm happy with my hair at the moment. But I think opening pubs is stupid at the moment when the deaths are still so high. I mean, they're not as high as they were a couple of months ago, but they are
No.
still in the hundreds. 137 people died yesterday. There's no way that you can control a group of drunken people. All
No.
it takes is one person to get absolutely hammered, and he will be all up in your personal space. He will be breathing all over you. He'll be shouting. He'll be jumping. He'll be sharing drinks because obviously that's what you do when you're drunk.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, it's far too early. Far too early.
I mean, I think your dad is a good example of this. I know a lot of people who are making, and it's a perfectly valid point that we can't stay like this forever, and we need to get the economy moving, which I completely understand. And it's very important that sectors like hairdressers and restaurants and pubs and all of that get going, because otherwise they will go under. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But you've also got to weigh up the risk, and I do agree that the risk is far too high at the moment. We've seen that Leicester have had a huge outbreak, and are going into isolation. I did actually see this morning that I think it was Spain has had an explosion of cases in some place in the region, and they've had to impose a lockdown there. And I think with just opening the pubs and all of that, as well as the campsites and hotels, is just asking for trouble, because you're going to get double the amount of people that there would have been if you hadn't allowed people to come on holiday. They should have opened the pubs before they opened the campsites and hotels, because then you would have had just the locals, and you wouldn't have the influx of visitors that's going to completely overwhelm all of the pubs. I'm going nowhere near a pub for at least a few weeks until it's calmed down, and until I think the risk has been reduced.
My main worry is that the government are putting the economy before public health. And you may feel differently about that.
No, I do agree, but I feel that their strategy for this is completely wrong. If they were worried about the economy, they should have done what New Zealand did and did a short, very, very strict, and I know this would have caused problems because people don't like being told that they can't go out and do anything, but it should have been even stricter. We shouldn't have been basically allowed out of the house like some of the other countries, unless it was for food, like exercise was I think too flexible, to be honest. As much as it was nice to be able to do it, I think if we had just done a shorter, very strict lockdown and closed all of the borders, because we're an island like New Zealand, and that would have made sense. But apparently it didn't make sense to the people in government. And then we would have been able to control it properly. If we got testing and tracing working, we would know exactly where we were, and then we'd be able to come out of it like New Zealand has, with absolutely no restrictions, no social distancing, none of all of these regulations that businesses are having to put in place and stuff. We could have just opened up the entire economy with no issues. So that's my view. I think if you wanted to protect the economy, they should have done a hard, short lockdown, control it properly, eliminate it, and then you can just open everything up. I mean, the economy cannot get going again with these restrictions in place. That's my opinion.
I feel exactly the same. I have family in New Zealand, and they are now completely out of lockdown. Their life has returned to normal, and that's not a new normal. Obviously, they will still contain the virus. So if you do think you have the virus, self-isolate and all of this, but they are meeting up in public again. Churches are open, and this is another thing that really confuses me as a churchgoer. Churches are allowed to reopen for public services.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to sing.
No. And I think it's one person per pew, isn't it, or something like that? Is it?
Yeah, I think that's the
I think
case.
that's what they said on the news last night. Yeah.
You're not allowed to sing, and you're not allowed to greet people with like handshakes or anything.
Well, I can understand the handshake,
which
but
makes sense. And churches don't tend to be huge spaces anyway. And especially with pews, there's no way you can contain the 1 meter distance, because someone's head will always be in front of you.
well, it's basically like a theatre, isn't it? You've got rows of seats, you know, people sitting beside you, behind you, in front of you. It's basically a theatre. So how come they're allowed to open, you know, they're allowed to open churches, but they can't open theatres?
My point exactly.
It hasn't been clearly thought through. There's too many silly things that haven't been taken into account. Like the theatres, I think they've said like they will open, but there won't be any live performances. Well, I'm sorry, but what's the point of a theatre if there's no live performances?
It makes no sense.
There must be some way they can open up. I mean, even if you have like, because it's now reduced to 1 meter plus, if you have like a seat in between two people, that's probably a meter, I would say.
Yeah.
And then you have the seat in front of you is clear and the seat behind you is clear. So I know the capacity will be dramatically reduced, but that's what you've got to deal with. And if you want them to open, which they're going to have to, otherwise the theatre's going to be done if they don't sort something out. There's ways of doing it that I just think they need to apply themselves and actually think about how they can do this.
And as a fascinating AIDA fan, I did bring this up in the debate with my dad. When theatres do eventually reopen and live performances are allowed to take place again, I imagine Fascinating AIDA would have to rewrite their show completely, mainly because they have two pianists. Michael plays the piano for one part of the first half, and then Dilly takes over, and the same again for the second.
I mean, you can't get much worse than a piano for spreading diseases, can you? Really? Because
No.
Obviously the touch, you can't get away from it. You'd have to sanitize the keys after every person has used it. That would be an issue.
And I can't see Dilly introducing a song whilst holding a bottle of disinfectant spraying the piano. As funny as that would be.
Excuse me a minute.
Bear with me for half an hour.
Sorry, while we just spray the keys with flash. It's very worrying though if you're in theatre or performance. Very worrying for them because there doesn't seem to be a clear point at which they're going to be able to go back to work when
And
shows are going to. I
plus,
mean, it's going to be probably at least a year. Looking at it at the moment, the way that's going. I mean, surely most theatres and cinemas and stuff are going to close because they'll just go bankrupt.
and plus, with acts like Fascinating Aida who meet the audience after,
Well, yeah, they wouldn't be able to do that.
they won't be able to do that. I remember when we went to see them in February, we went to get signatures, and a guy got very close to Adele's face, and she said, "It's personal space, darling."
Yeah, so she must be rejoicing at the 2 metre distance.
But you obviously can't give them tickets for them to be signed because they would, unless they wear gloves.
That wouldn't work. But I still think they could find a way of opening theatres just by doing the spacing in between each person. I know it would be like half the audience that they would normally be able to fill, but it's better than nothing, isn't it?
If they're saying football fans can return to the stadiums for September when the new season starts, why can't theatres reopen?
And they've also said, actually, another absolutely ridiculous thing. I mean, I'm not a fan of cricket at all. I despise it. But they've said that cricket can't begin again because of the tees and the locker room or something like that. I mean, complete farce. If tennis can go ahead, I mean, the professional tennis isn't going ahead yet, but I don't see why cricket is viewed as such a huge problem.
And if
no different from any other sport.
Football can go ahead as a contact sport, and I'm an avid football fan at the moment, so I've been watching all of the football games.
Yeah.
And they kick the ball around. They're all sharing the same ball when they pick the ball up for a throw-in. They're all using the same ball for a corner. And the only ones with gloves on are the keepers.
Yeah. They look a bit ridiculous if they were running around with gloves on.
But how does it make sense?
It doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. That's what's irritating. It's just everything has been completely nonsensical. And the reason they're having to make all of these silly rules and exceptions is because they haven't got a handle on the pandemic. If they had got a grip and had actually reduced the deaths and cases to a manageable level, then we wouldn't have these issues. It's as simple as that.